Aurelia Skipwith, the Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a position she's held since January 2020. Now, Director Skipwith, you are visiting Washington State to celebrate new hunting and fishing opportunities on public lands. Can you elaborate on what those opportunities are?
President Trump and Secretary Bernhardt, since the beginning of this administration, have been focused on public access of our public lands. And this year, with our hunting and fishing opportunities that will be finalized in the next couple weeks, is going to be a historic number of the amount of acres for hunting, fishing, and this really goes to what this administration is focused on is public access. So those opportunities range from hunting of different species that might not have been offered before. So you might have a raccoon, fox, deer, etc., and other opportunities just of expanding, being able to, open further areas. So maybe those species were already there that could be hunted, but now we've been able to provide more acres. And then for the fishing opportunities, having those opportunities on our hatcheries. So the Fish and Wildlife Service has 568 national refuges, and we have 70 fish hatcheries. So there is a place in every single state for a person to come out and visit the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then I'm also in the state of Washington to open one of our trails that we had opened about 3 weeks ago, and that dealt with when President Trump gave his Reopening America plan, which was a 3-phased approach on how do we open back up. And so we had one of our boardwalks that was closed due to the COVID pandemic, but following along with the state guidelines that were, following along with what the public health officials were able to reopen this boardwalk to provide public access. And there is no better place to social distance during this time than your local refuge.
Okay. And what specific areas have you toured while you've been here? And how long have you been here in the state?
So I arrived last night.
Okay. Whirlwind trip.
A whirlwind trip. So today was over up in Nisqually, Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge.
Okay.
So toured there. It was a great opportunity to meet with some of our partners.
Sure. And
also meet with some of the staff. And would say during this time, our law enforcement have been on the front lines, making sure that the public is safe when they're coming to visit our refuges during this time, as well as a lot of our people that have been in the field, our maintenance workers, making sure that our assets and our resources are safe during this time as well. And during this pandemic, we have been open for business. So we are still operating, and this entire time, most of our lands have been open for the people to come and visit, and we're very proud of that. And that was a priority for President Trump. It was a priority for Secretary Bernhardt, and we were glad to be able to make that happen.
Do you see more people taking advantage of that now?
Oh, most definitely.
Right.
Which is great. So we've seen a real increase in the amount of visitors coming to our refuge lands. And during the pandemic, a lot of the other places were closed.
Right.
So that meant that people would come to the refuge, come to visit. You get outdoors, you get to see the wildlife, you get to see the habitat.
Fresh air,
bird watch, and it's healthy medicine to be able to get outdoors and, for us to be able to provide that for the American people.
What new things have you learned about here in the Northwest during your trip, and where are you going next?
So far on this trip, learning about the relationship that Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge has with the Nisqually tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So having those conversations, hearing the history of that area, hearing the history of that tribe, and the relationship that the service has built with them, and respecting that heritage that's there, as well as you get to see the the intersection of the American heritage of hunting and fishing and respecting the lands, which is something that's common that I learned also that the tribe has too. And also just the partnership that Nisqually Refuge has with the Mount Rainier.
Right.
That was interesting and exciting to learn how our lands just intersect and how we have that partnership that's built there. So that was great to learn about Nisqually. And so next, I'm here till Sunday morning. So it's a really quick trip. And while I'm here, it's visiting as many places, seeing as many of our folks and our partners that I can along the trip. So I'll be headed to one of our hatcheries, a little white salmon hatchery, and then also to Steigerwald National Wildlife Refuge as well. And so on this trip, it provides me the opportunity to see 2 of our urban refuges here on the West Coast.
It's pretty breathtaking, isn't it, here?
Oh, it is absolutely beautiful.
Everywhere you go, there's something beautiful to see, isn't there?
Yeah, and so I'm a runner myself.
Are you?
So seeing what you guys have out here makes me want to just put on my running shoes and go for a run.
Oh, we have the most beautiful backyard. You know?
Yeah, you do.
I live by the gorge, so it's just breathtaking. Okay, so what do you feel are the most pressing issues the agency faces here in the Northwest and in the general region?
Yeah, the most pressing issue in the Northwest would be salmon. So salmon is king here in the Northwest.
We love our salmon.
And that is something that I've learned really and had a better understanding when I came here on the ground, especially when I was here in January of this year. And there's a lot of stakeholders at the table when it comes to salmon. You have tribes, you have the commercial industry, recreational industry, other federal agencies that are working hard to make sure that there's the habitat for salmon, making sure that we have the populations, that they're able to go through their entire life cycle.
Right.
So salmon is one of the most important issues here in this region. And then another one to add to that, and this is just agency-wide, what all of our regions, what we're focused on, the Fish and Wildlife Service, is making sure that we have public access. And with that public access, it's an opportunity for people to learn about what the Fish and Wildlife Service is. And people are more willing to protect resources, assets when they know about them. And so in order for the Fish and Wildlife Service to continue on its mission to be successful is about educating people about what we do, what we have in our lands, what our responsibilities are, so that they're more willing to protect it when that time comes.
An awareness.
Awareness, exactly.
And often you don't really know something until you actually feel it or see it, right? You can read about it, you can see it on a screen, but when you experience it, it's something different, correct?
It's completely different. You can read a 1 to 2 page document, you can watch something on television and it can be the greatest photography that you've ever seen, but until you actually go on the ground and you feel it and you see it and you touch it and it awakens those other senses, then you have a greater appreciation and you're more willing to say, okay, let me step back and understand this topic a little bit more. And then you're also willing to share that information that you learned with someone else and say, hey, let's bring a friend next time I go to the refuge. I saw X, Y, and Z, and maybe they'll see that as well.
Yeah, so is there more of a respect that happens when they do that?
I would definitely say so. And that's what we're really working on when it comes to our urban refuges.
Okay.
So within the Fish and Wildlife Service, under the Fish and Wildlife Service, we have our National Wildlife Refuge System. And in that system, we have 568 units across the U.S. and in U.S. territories. And of that 568, 101 of those are urban refuges, meaning that within 25 miles of that refuge is a population of 250,000 people or more. So that shows that there are these spaces, these havens, refuges. I also call them outdoor classrooms, where you can go and it's nearby. You don't have to travel hundreds of miles to go see the outdoors. It's right there in your backyard. And it's building those relationships with the community to let them know that these spaces are here for them to use.
So what are you doing to educate the public about more of that?
I would say having a conversation with you.
Okay, there we go.
So you can
Hear that, audience?
So your members can
Share.
Yeah, exactly. Share, like, that there's these spaces for them to come and visit, and it's by word of mouth. It's by sharing. It's by going online.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the oldest federal conservation agency, going back to 1871, and the only agency in the federal government whose primary responsibility is the management of fish and wildlife for the American public. The service helps ensure a healthy environment for people by providing opportunities for Americans to enjoy the outdoors and our shared national heritage. So my question for you is, how has the agency evolved over time to meet all those needs?
Yeah, so the agency, in some aspects, the agency hasn't changed, and then other aspects it has. The mission of protecting, enhancing our fish and wildlife service, or our fish and wildlife and their habitats, that is a staple throughout. And the methods that we use to make sure that that happens has changed over time. One of the key things that I think about is the North American model, and making sure that we are protecting these species, wildlife. They are for the American people, and we are stewards of that. And so we have different programs, legislation that has been introduced to enable us to carry out that mission, such as a key one is the Pittman-Robertson and Dingell-Johnson Acts, in which hunters, true conservationists, their money that goes in for hunting and fishing, the excise taxes that come off of ammunition or fishing and bait tackle, that goes straight back into conservation to the state agencies, enabling us to make sure that those areas are protected, those habitats are protected, ensuring that we have stable populations. And then you also think about the other acts that we have that created the duck stamp, in which funds go to acquisitions for lands for migratory birds. Mm-hmm. And so in those instances, those things they've just been methods for us since this agency has been established to allow us to make sure that we're protecting and enhancing. And another key thing when it comes to our mission, the last piece is working with partners, and then also making sure that we're ensuring the benefit for future generations. And for example, with COVID, we have we've been able to pivot.
We can't escape COVID, can we?
We cannot escape it.
It's everywhere.
and it's changing the way that we're doing business. And that's one of the things that you learn is, if you're going to stay relevant, which we must in order to protect the wildlife and their habitat, is you have to become innovative. And so we've gone and found ways to, how do we do things online? How do we still find ways to connect with the audiences and tell them, hey, come out and visit us. We're still open. These lands are your lands. So it's going to be exciting to see, the ways we've been able to innovate,
sure,
to still make sure that we are meeting our mission. And the staff at the Fish and Wildlife Service are absolutely excellent at the jobs that they do.